Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning into the Vibrant Health Podcast, hosted by myself, Jessica Espinoza, and my friend and colleague, Lydia Shatney. I am a wellness coach and educator whose main goal is to help inspire you to live your most vibrant life. You can find me writing about all things health and wellness over at deliciousobsessions.com and jessicaespinoza.com. Lydia is a nutritional therapist and founder of the divinehealthfromtheinsideout.com website, where she works with clients all over the country and helps them improve and regain their health using nutritional and mineral balancing protocols. We are so excited that you're taking time out of your day to tune in. But before we get started, since this is a health-related podcast, it should be noted that we are not licensed medical professionals. The information and advice provided in this podcast is not intended to diagnose, treat, or prescribe for any illness or health issue and should not be construed as medical advice. You should always consult with your medical practitioner before making any changes to your diet, supplementation, medication, or lifestyle. Now, on to today's episode. Thank you for tuning in. Let's get this show started. Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode number 35 of the Vibrant Health Podcast. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. I am here with my co-host, Lydia, and we are very excited to have Jessica Bischof back on the show today to talk more about methylation. You may remember Jessica joining us on episode number 23, where we discussed the basics of methylation. So if you haven't listened to that episode yet, we would encourage you to go do that because it gives you some background on our more in-depth discussion today. So welcome back to the show, Jessica. Before we dive into the nitty-gritty of today's talk, would you like to take a minute and tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and why you have specialized in methylation in your own practice?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So I am a nutritional therapy consultant and a restorative wellness practitioner. I basically practice functional nutrition with my clients. And the reason I do this, quite a few of us in the holistic health practice and holistic health world, is that I just found that my own health was dramatically improved by kind of taking a holistic approach and the functional medicine approach. And methylation and understanding the detox pathways and how all of this works together has been part of my own healing journey and something that I've seen be very powerful with my clients as well. So I mostly specialize in kind of a functional approach. I do a lot with endocrine hormones, adrenal hormones, and gut health. And, and those areas are really foundational when you're looking at your methylation. Methylation and understanding the genes is really not something that's a standalone. You can't manipulate your genes through supplements alone and not look at the diet and the environment, the health of the body. So all of these things work together, and when you are laying that epigenetic foundation with diet and lifestyle and improving function, then the genetic component has some really big impacts, and that's where I like to bring it in. Usually it's not the first step, it's one of the later steps after we've done some of that foundational work.
Awesome. That's great.
So today we kind of want to dive into this topic in a way that people can start to understand why it might be important for them. We did cover that last time, but something that is really a big deal anymore is the B vitamins, right, and folate. And so, I was at the store the other day. I needed to buy some bread. I just needed to buy some bread. And I'm looking at all the breads, I was going to go with a sourdough, maybe for the kids, or I was looking at the gluten-free, and I'm looking at the labels, and I'm folic acid, folic acid, folic acid. And I'm good grief, why are they putting folic acid in the bread? And, of course, I know I don't want folic acid, right? But why do we not want folic acid? Do you want to explain, that whole piece and kind of how the B vitamins get transformed and why, we want to be more careful about our choices when it comes to the B vitamins?
Absolutely.
Especially in light of methylation,
Right. So just to kind of give a little bit of background for those of you who didn't immediately pause and go back and re-listen to our previous episode, when we're talking about methylation and we're talking about these genes, I'm just going to give a little bit of a thumbnail here. So the really important gene that everybody talks about is the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase gene, and that is abbreviated as MTHFR. So there's two different gene variants that we talk about when we're discussing this, the 677 and the 1298 mutation. And what these mutations or genetic defects do is they prevent our body from turning folate in our food into the active form that our body needs for our biochemical reactions. So whenever we're talking about nutrition, this is really basic. There's a few different ways that we can have a deficiency. We can have a deficiency in our diet, that we're just not getting it, not bringing enough in. We can have a deficiency in our ability to digest and assimilate that nutrient. And we can have a deficiency because of our ability to transform the nutrient into something that's actually bioavailable and usable to the body. So we always want to look at kind of all three of these things and make sure that all three of these pathways are working well. When it comes to folate and folic acid, this is a nutrient, also vitamin B9, that is very important for us to be able to do quite a few functions in the body. In fact, you could say that there's almost not a function in the body that doesn't require this nutrient, and that is a big statement to make, and I understand that. So it affects our ability to replicate our DNA. It affects our ability to detoxify. It affects our ability to make our hormones, specifically the neurotransmitter hormones that affect our mood and emotion, thought processes, concentration, and so forth like that. So it's really important, and we want to make sure that we're getting it in the diet and that we're able to assimilate it. And people who have this mutation, the MTHFR mutation, have a reduced capacity to turn the version that comes in through our food into the active version that their body needs. So people who have one copy of the 677 variant, researchers tell us they believe that there's about a 40% reduction in their ability to turn folate into the active form of methyl tetrahydrofolate. And people who have two copies may have up to 70% or greater reduced ability to use that. And so where folic acid comes in, folic acid is a synthetic, shelf-stable, and very inexpensive version of vitamin B9. So they started making this back in the 40s, and they were able to reduce some forms of neural tube defects, and that's a good thing. I mean, we've definitely seen less minor bifida and midline defects since adding this to really adding it to everything. It's in all of our enriched products. It's in your orange juice. It's in your vitamin drinks. It's in your crackers, anything that you're using a flour, any sort of a wheat flour. If it's enriched, that means it's got folic acid added to it. So by adding it everywhere in the food supply, they were able to reduce some neurotube defects, and that's a good thing. However, for people who have the MTHFR defect, the process of converting folic acid into the next step before it can then come into the whole about 10-step process of making it completely active is a very slow process, and it takes a lot of enzymatic energy. And so people who already have a reduced ability to convert folates into the active form, bringing folic acid in for those people is going to slow that down even further. It clogs up the receptor sites, and it just gums up the works because their body's not able to use it effectively. So it's really important for people who have the MTHFR defects to avoid folic acid. I say if you go to your vitamin cabinet and just start looking at products, honestly, I tell my clients, if you have a supplement on your shelf and it has folic acid in it, throw it away. It hurts because you're putting some money in the garbage can, but it's not worth taking something that's going to damage you. So avoid it in your supplements, absolutely, and avoid it in processed foods. And most of us these days are trying to eat clean and trying to avoid processed foods in general, but as Lydia said, we do still buy some things at the store. We may be buying bread or tortillas or who knows, what we're buying. And we're probably trying to make a good choice there and look at, maybe it's organic or has better quality oils and things. But it's really hard to avoid the folic acid if you're buying prepared food. So working on that, avoiding it as much as possible. And then for people who are ill or people who know they have a folic acid issue or they know they have the MTHFR issue, those people may need to take an even greater stringency with that and just really, really, reduce all their exposures. So it kind of, I think there's a spectrum. Some people may not need to be as strict about that as others, but I always tell people don't buy a supplement that has folic acid in it because it's just, there's no point. We have options today with good supplements, and there's really no reason to do that to your body.
Right. So that was awesome. So really anyone out there who is still planning on having children, should be paying attention to this and consider really looking into this. But even if you don't go and get testing to understand your methylation information, you may just want to go ahead and take the folate, right? So that's a big thing to pay attention to if you're that person. But then we also want to ask the question, what about everyone else? And what about all the other B vitamins? Is there more information that we can share about the active forms of the other B vitamins as well?
Absolutely. So as you probably know these days, reading supplement labels can be tricky. And if you're not educated, you're trying to do your best, but sometimes we just don't understand what things mean. And I really think that there's a need probably for somebody to stand up and just do a lot of educating about this. But I don't know of a resource to point anyone to. So on the topic of labels, the first thing to know is that if you're looking at a supplement, and let's just say that it's a multivitamin, look for what form of folate is there. If it says folic acid, you know that that's not good, so you're not going to buy it. However, many times the label will just say folate, and they can legally put folate on the label when the actual product is folic acid. And the reason is that folate is kind of an umbrella term. It's like saying automobile. Now, there's different kinds of automobiles, right? There might be a car or a minivan or a truck. Those are all automobiles as well. So it's not, they're not misrepresenting. They may, who knows why they use the language they use. But just because a label says folate does not mean that you are not getting folic acid. So you really want to find out what form of folate they're talking about. Now, there's a product called calcium folinate, and several of the better manufacturers use this. There's a company called Biotics Research. I use their supplements quite a bit in my practice. Nearly all of the Biotics products have calcium folinate in their supplements. Now, calcium folinate is not toxic to people with the MTHFR defect in the way that folic acid is. It's not the active form. So it's kind of halfway down that 10-step process of transformation. A person with the MTHFR defect will still struggle to convert that into the active form. It still needs to be converted, but it is, like I said, about halfway down that chain. So it's safe for a person with MTHFR, but it may not be the optimal form of bringing in the ready-to-use nutrient into their body. There's also the active form of folate is going to be called, it may be called 5-MTHF. And then very often the supplement companies that are using this active form are going to spell it out for you. So it may say something like 1,000 milligrams of folate, and then in parentheses as, 500 milligrams of 5-methyl tetrahydrofolate and 500 milligrams as calcium folinate. So it's going to usually spell it out as to exactly what it is if you're getting the better form. So that's the first thing I always look at when I look at the label. And then I'm going to look for the active forms of the other B vitamins, especially vitamin B2, B6, and B12. So with vitamin B2 and B6, they're going to say 5-phosphate at the end of it. So it may say riboflavin as riboflavin-5-phosphate. With B6, that is going to be pyridoxine 5-phosphate. Sometimes that might be abbreviated on a label as just P5P. So, again, there's different nutrients and cofactors required for our body to metabolize things from the food level of a nutrient to the biochemically active level of a nutrient. And depending on where our health is, depending on how well we're assimilating other cofactors, depending on the diet, there are going to be numerous reasons that the body is going to be slowed down in making those transformations. So my approach in my practice is when recommending a supplement, I generally recommend products where all of those nutrients are the bioavailable forms. And we just kind of don't have to worry about getting, all the other cofactors there if we're giving the body the product that's already ready to use. So I talked about B2 and B6. I'm going to come back and talk about B2 a little bit more later in the call. But the active form of vitamin B12 is probably a little bit more well-known, and that would be methylcobalamin. So if you look at a product and it just says cyanocobalamin, that is absolutely the cheapest form for them to use, and it's usually going to be really high dose. And the reason for that is because it's really difficult for us to absorb and assimilate, extremely difficult. And so it's cheap. They just put it into a product in a high dose, and they kind of hope some gets through. That's what they're going for. You might hear in the name cyanocobalamin. The cyano is actually a cyanide that is in there, and it's not dangerous. You're not going to get cyanide poisoning, but it is something that has to be cleaved off and the body has to deal with. So that's another reason that I avoid products that have cyanocobalamin. So, if you're looking at that multivitamin in Costco, and let me just say there's probably nothing in Costco that's worth buying. Or if you're standing in the, vitamin aisle at your local health food store, or you're looking online, my super fast and dirty way to see if a product is a quality product or if it's just super cheap is if it has folic acid and cyanocobalamin in it. If it has those two forms of the vitamins, you basically know that they are making this as cheap as possible. It's not a quality line. Just put it down. Don't waste your money. Now, when it comes to the active form of vitamin B12, there's a few different forms. Methylcobalamin is by far the most common, and a lot of products are going to have methylcobalamin in it, and that is the biologically active version of B12. There is adenosylcobalamin and hydroxylcobalamin. And adenosylcobalamin is actually the form of B12 that's used by the mitochondria, which, of course, are the energy-producing factories in the center of our cells. So there's kind of this whole area when it comes to vitamin B12. Some people are exquisitely sensitive to something that we're going to call methyl donors, and going into what that is definitely beyond the scope of our call today. But for some people, they don't do well on B12. It may make them anxious. It may make them jittery, kind of ramps them up way too high. And so for those people, they may do much better on the adenosylcobalamin or the hydroxylcobalamin. If you see one of those forms of B12 on a label, it probably means that you're looking at a quality product. Now, of course, that's a generalization, but they're more expensive to make. They're definitely far less common, and so you're looking at something that has some thought and intention in going into it. But our body, kind of the bottom line there is our body is going to have to transform these B vitamins into the active form. And if you're going to purchase a supplement, I'm just a big fan of spending your money on something that's already in the active form, and then you don't have to wonder how well your body's doing right now today with its health status of making these conversions. You're getting the most bang for your buck when you do that.
Cool. Wow, that was great. And I think that that's going to be really helpful for people. And I think there's probably going to be the question of, can we get enough in our food? What do you think about that?
Well, enough is kind of a vague question. So there's the RDA. Some of us like to call that the really dumb amount, because the RDA amounts were generally arrived at as the minimum amount that was needed not to have, disease states of deficiency. So certainly we can overdo it with specific nutrients, and I think that definitely can be true if we're taking a lot of supplements, that people can inadvertently overdose themselves on a nutrient, and that is a concern as well. But when it comes to getting enough from our food, I generally don't think that we can, and there can be a couple of reasons for this. One is our food quality is not, even if we're buying organic and we're trying to buy local and do as well as we can there, our food is just minerally deficient compared to where it was even 50 years ago. And that's not the conspiracy theorists who are coming up with that. That's coming from the FDA, who, is not a super conservative health approach, I would say. So the FDA has plenty of information about how the food mineral quality has declined over the last 50 years. That really goes back to farming methods. So certainly eating a lot of fruits and vegetables, specifically vegetables, is going to be your best source for nutrition. Eating raw vegetables is going to be needed for especially the B vitamins, which are all pretty heat fragile and will be damaged when you do very much cooking. And the reality is what volume of raw vegetables are each of us really eating every day? Every day, because B vitamins are water soluble. What your body doesn't use, you're going to eliminate in your urine. So this isn't like I ate a great salad last weekend. This is every single day. So that's number one, and that's really just talking about maintenance. And then number two, we have therapeutic uses of nutrients to heal and to restore. And many people who are really pursuing health and holistic health are not doing that because they're already optimal and they want to stay optimal. Many of us are doing it because we're compromised and we are trying to get back to optimal. So when you're working with someone who is compromised, who is having challenges, you're going to need some high therapeutic doses of different nutrients to bring the body back to a level of, really being optimal, of being healthy and being well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Cool. Well, this is awesome. Now, let's segue a little bit into a specific health issue, which is extremely common and plaguing a lot of women today, and that's, hypothyroidism, or, people who are producing low thyroid hormone to begin with. And, I understand that we need certain B vitamins there, but there's also, a connection with, whether you're hypothyroid and able to convert your certain B vitamins to make your methylation cycle work to begin with. Excuse me. So that's where I'd like to head next and have you kind of hash that out, because we have so many people, I'm sure, who are listening that are hypothyroid that could really benefit from this information.
Okay. So this is really cool stuff. This is the kind of stuff I just totally geek out over, but it's complex, and I'm going to take you through a few steps. So let's go back for a minute. We're going to talk about that MTHFR enzyme. And that's the enzyme, it's the last step in a chain of processes that's going to give us active folate so that we can go do all those important processes that we talked about. Okay? So MTHFR is an enzyme. Generally speaking, enzymes require cofactors to work. The MTHFR enzyme requires a cofactor of a nutrient called FAD. And FAD is the active form of riboflavin, or vitamin B2. Okay? So we have to have FAD to make MTHFR work. So this means, that the body's going to have to, of course, have this active FAD. Now, one of the things that we want to say is, what is the body going to use to convert riboflavin from our food into FAD? So it uses ATP, which is the energy currency produced by the mitochondria, and it's also been demonstrated that the body needs thyroxine to make that conversion. Now, thyroxine is the main thyroid hormone called T4, and many people today are low in T4, especially people who are taking like a natural or desiccated thyroid hormone replacement. So myself, I am on Armour Thyroid. I have been for a number of years. And when you're on a natural thyroid, it comes from, it's porcine, so it's coming from pigs. And pigs have a higher ratio of active thyroid to inactive thyroid. So when we're taking that, we tend to be a little bit heavy on the T3 side and a little low on the T4 side. And that's important because people who are low in T4, which is often kind of dismissed as the metabolically inactive form of hormone, it's not doing anything in the body. Well, not true. Now, it's not having a thyroid effect in the body, but as we see with many other areas of the body, we kind of don't have extra parts. We don't have extra hormones. We don't have, usually when they say that there's an extra part and it's not good for anything, it just means they haven't figured out why it's there, because our bodies are amazing and everything seems to serve multiple roles and multiple purposes. So thyroxine, or T4, the metabolically inactive form of thyroid hormone, is needed to synthesize FAD from vitamin B2. And there's been some really interesting research on that. So one of the things that they have seen is that in people who have high blood pressure and the MTHFR 677 mutation, so that mutation, it puts you at risk for cardiac disease, and one of those things is high blood pressure is going to be associated with that. Vitamin B2 was more effective for lowering their blood pressure than blood pressure drugs. Because, again, B2 is going to make that MTHFR enzyme operate better. So being able to, methylate or phosphorylate our riboflavin and get the active form is important. And that is tied back to that hypothyroid status. So, again, to my way of thinking, this is just another point for the idea of taking, the active form of vitamins when we take them. And I think it also really speaks to making sure that our thyroid status is optimal. And, that means getting more testing than just your TSH tested. Work with your doctor on that, if at all possible. If your doctor is not going to play ball, there's other holistic practitioners who can give you guidance on what to get tested. And then make sure that your levels are really optimal. And generally that means, at least in about the 50% of range, that you want to make sure you have plenty of hormone for your body to be carrying out its operations. So, when we talk about the vitamin B2 or the FAD causing the MTHFR enzyme to work, which it does, the other thing that I think is really interesting with that is the way that it can affect kind of our mood in the body. So it's pretty well established and common information that people who are hypothyroid or who have a low thyroid status often struggle with depression. In fact, if you kind of pay attention to the the patient groups and the thyroid support groups, I would say, gosh, at least 50%, maybe higher, will say that they've struggled with depression for years until they finally appropriately supported their thyroid. And many, many people have gone to their doctor and gotten a prescription for an antidepressant instead of a prescription for thyroid medication. Mm. So, it's not really addressing the root cause. And there may be a time and a place for, antidepressant medication, but that should be secondary to ruling out any causes that are, actually creating the depression in the body. Well, we know that the MTHFR, or the methylation cycle, has a direct role on our neurotransmitter production. So when your methylation is working well, one of the things that does in the body is it helps the body convert the biopterin into I'm not going to be able to say it. But basically, the biopterin cycle is the very most upstream cycle in the body for creating all of our neurotransmitters and recycling all of those neurotransmitters and keeping the appropriate levels in the body. So if we back it all up, without our B vitamins, without our thyroid, we're not going to make our B vitamins well, that are going to help the methylation work, that's going to help our moods work. So there's definitely the potential that part of the way the depression may be manifesting with hypothyroidism could come back to having its roots in this methylation cycle and the biopterin cycle and the way that those create neurotransmitters in the body. It's really fascinating to me. The more I learn and the more I research, how we just see that the body is complex and there's all these layers and things affect each other. And that can kind of get a little overwhelming and a little confusing. But what I also see is the simplicity as we just keep peeling back the layers and understanding more and more about how different processes and hormone cycles affect each other. At the nutrition level, when we go really deep, we find that the basics just keep coming back up. It's magnesium, it's zinc, it's our B vitamins, it's our antioxidants. And I think that there's kind of a tendency with human nature that we want the magical berry from South America that's going to, be the silver bullet and restore our health. That it's something new and unusual and novel that we haven't discovered yet. And really, the more I learn, the more I continue to see that it's really a level of really kind of basic nutrition. It's beautiful and elegant when we understand how the body works together in all of these amazing ways, but the fuel that makes all of that run is not necessarily very sexy, but it's very important. And so I think that's actually really cool that as we work on eating real food, we take our basic supplements, we do those things that we can do pretty accessibly as consumers. It has a really big and really lasting impact through multiple layers of our health. And to me, that's really fun. And it's a great joy to be able to, bring in those nutrient supports with my clients targeted to what's going on with them and see the amazing changes that can go on in the body. And Lydia, I'm sure you've experienced that as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So this has been really awesome information, and, even though I've been kind of tapping into it myself, I still learned some cool stuff today. So thank you for that. And I do want to say, kind of in a summary, the focus takeaway here of today is even if you do not yet have your genetic data, so something like a 23andMe test result, you can walk away from this knowing it's important to look at the B vitamins you're taking in your supplements and take a look at them, try to take some notes and look for those forms. And at the very least, focus on that, If you are interested in going deeper and really getting a better handle on your unique, kind of methylation status or at least your gene information to see if it's playing a role into your health, right? The 23andMe is a great test. We talked about it last time a bit, and it's very simple. It's very cheap considering the amount of information you get, and it's not a repeat test. You don't have to ever do it again. So it's very useful and affordable and obtainable, and you just really need somebody to help you kind of navigate it, and that's something Jessica does do. As you heard her today, she's very well versed in this information. So we hope that you guys were able to learn something today. I certainly did, and if you want more information, we're going to leave Jessica's site so you can check her out and reach out to her if you feel like you're ready to look into this further. Do you have anything further to add, Jessica Espinoza?
I don't think so. This was all really great information. I just got my 23andMe results back not too long ago, and so I'm just now starting to dive into all of this, and it's so complex. So I really advise people to work with somebody that knows what they're doing because you can't figure it out on your own. Like, I started reading through information on my own, and within like 15 minutes, my head was going to blow up. So it really is beneficial to work with somebody that understands this and can really kind of guide you into picking the right kind of supplements that you need and helping you understand how all of these systems work in the body. It's totally fascinating for me because the body is just so incredible. And the more that we learn, it just blows my mind at how incredible we are.
Right. Yeah, it is so cool. And I do want to just say really quick, I had my 23andMe done I think it was December maybe. And so I got my results back, and Jessica actually helped me go through them. And I added in a couple of things. I'd already been aware to take the right forms of Bs, for quite some time. So I was already knew, but I wasn't taking enough for my needs. And I made a few switches and a few tweaks, and honestly, it really helped me. I mean, it hasn't like changed my whole life, and I'm miraculously healed of everything, but it did make quite a difference, and it was noticeable for me. And it's funny because I've been doing hair analysis on myself for quite some time, and I had a really hard time releasing any heavy metals. And my test after I started, working on my methylation piece, I actually started to show some, and I kind of think that there's a correlation there, just supporting my detox capabilities a bit through the nutrients that I added from this information. So that was just a kind of really simple story to share that, it can make a difference. And so, I know a lot of people are like, well, gee, should I really do this, or should I really look into this? And there's no pressure, of course, but it really could be something that could help you out. So, if you're really struggling and you've done a lot already, maybe this is something you'll want to look into as well. So with that, thank you so much, Jessica, for coming again and sharing all your insights. It was really cool to hear some of that information in a different way that I haven't. So we appreciate you.
You are welcome. And if I could just leave your listeners with one thing, and that is that some of you may have experienced in the past that you do not do well when you take a multivitamin, or you don't do well if you try and take a B vitamin. And if that has been your experience, then I would just encourage you to get the 23andMe done and work with a practitioner who can help you hack that and fine-tune for your body. I made a pretty strong push during our episode today to take those active forms of Bs. Many people are going to do fantastic on it. Depending on your unique genetics, you may struggle if you try that. And if you do, it just means that you have some more specific needs, and you're going to need somebody to help you figure those out. So it doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that these aren't for you. It doesn't mean you don't need them. It means you need some more information. So if that's been your experience, do consider getting the testing done. Consider finding a practitioner to work with. I do it, but there's a growing amount of people who do it. I'm not just trying to get clients. I just would encourage you, if you're one of those people, then that means that your body just really does need some extra help. And you probably have the potential to make some really big shifts in your health when you get that part figured out.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And I think we're really just kind of going to wrap up here and leave people with that insight today.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thanks for having me on.
It was awesome.
Thank you so much for listening to the Vibrant Health Podcast. We really appreciate you taking time out of your day to listen to the information we're sharing. If this information resonated with you and you know others who could benefit from it, we would love it if you'd share it with them. We'd also be very appreciative if you could leave us a review on iTunes or Stitcher. If you're on our sites or YouTube listening to this, we'll have links down below where you can leave a review. If you're on your phone listening through the app, you can also leave a review directly through the app. It only takes about a minute, super fast, super easy, and your shares and reviews help us reach more people with our message of health and wellness, so we really, really appreciate your support. If you're looking for more information on health and wellness in general, both Lydia and I have a ton of information on our sites. You can find me over at jessicaespinoza.com, which is my main practice website and where I offer my 21-day sugar detox coaching, and in the future I'm going to be offering nutritional therapy coaching as well. You can also find me on deliciousobsessions.com, which is my main real food and natural living website. You can find Lydia over at divinehealthfromtheinsideout.com, where she offers nutritional therapy consultations and hair tissue mineral analysis services for those who are ready to take their health to the next level. Lastly, if you have any suggestions for topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes, we would absolutely love to hear from you. We want these podcasts to be as informational and inspirational as possible, and we'd love to hear from you and understand exactly what you would like us to cover. You can email us or leave a comment below or even give us a shout out on social media. We both look forward to serving you and inspiring you to live the healthiest, happiest lives possible. Thanks for listening.